Hey, all, Andy here, helping you build a career you love. Happy Thursday. We're talking goal setting today. Who doesn't love this topic every December and January? Actually, you should be thinking about your goals every day of the year. Get in the chat, say hi. We got a fun one. Put some question marks in front of your questions. Let me know where you're watching from. If you're in any of my programmers, use a hashtag and let me know. Let me say hey right before we dive in because I'm starting with a story and I want to get into it because we got a lot to cover. John, great to see you. Michael Moore, what's up? Adam Stark from the other side of the pond. My mom from, well, a few suburbs over. Vipin, Relaciones Publicas. Great to have you. Penelope from Frankfurt. Wow, we got a lot of different folks in the house. Love to have y'all. Kara's hopefully with me somewhere. When I see green lights, I go. Okay, we're going to talk goal setting today. I got about 4 or 5 points for you. I would say they're principles and tactics, but principles more than anything about how to think through goals. And I want to share a story from my life about 10 years ago when goal setting really started to become prominent in my life. I had always set goals every year as a professional back in 1988 when I started, but even before that when I was a college student. And I'd set a lot of goals and I learned a lot about what it took to accomplish goals. But as I evolved into my professional life, I had a whole different way of looking at goals. I want to share some of that with you today. And if you are in my leadership coaching program, we're meeting tomorrow. Today's December 14th. Tomorrow's December 15th. We're meeting tomorrow to take a deeper dive. So I want to talk to you about 2013. So about 10 years ago, I was a full-blown executive recruiter, business to business, professional, where we would sell recruitment services to companies. I also had published at that time Interview Intervention that came out in 2012. And I was blogging I had a newsletter and all that good stuff, but it wasn't the most prominent part of my profession. Recruiting was. But I had there was a seed in me somewhere that knew that I was in the second act of my career, but I knew there was a third act. I knew that third act to me was going to entail helping a lot more people with their lives, with their careers. And I knew that I needed to become more aggressive in reaching out to people via different mediums rather than just the phone. And I happened to get an email from a friend of mine, Mary, and she sent me this couple of line email that said, Andy, checking in. I need about 45 minutes of your time. Could we catch up? And I don't know if you have a friend like Mary. Everybody seems to have a friend like Mary in their life that's just a person you just can't say no to no matter what. They always just figure out a way to get what they want from you. And I don't even mean that in a bad way, because this message came with the best of intention. So I called her up, wanted to know what the heck this was going to cost me with my time. But I loved her and I do love her. And I called her up and she said, Annie, I got hired to project management this event that the Western Golf Association is throwing. And so I knew she was probably going to want me to speak. Now, before I get into the guts of the story, I want to tell you that when I think about goals today, I think very much about having a direction in my life and knowing where I'm going and being able to recognize the parts of things that enter my life that I should take advantage of, gain more exposure to. And at this time where I wanted to start speaking more, I wanted to start doing some of these things. While today in my life, which is very busy, and I have a rigid regiment, let's call it, of ways I go about whether I'm going to say yes to something or say no to something. At this time, 10 years ago, I was very open, but I wanted to make sure it was part of who I wanted to be, what I wanted to be as a professional. If I was going to spend any of my time, especially volunteering, I wanted to make sure it was worthwhile. And so she said, we're looking for somebody to come in and talk to these scholarship students. They have a once a year, an annual event where the Western Golf Association, which is obviously associated with golf and it promotes a lot of events, but one of the greatest things the Western Golf Association does is they've created a scholarship program for caddies at country clubs that is, provided you get good grades and you need the financial assistance. They give full ride scholarships to a lot of big schools throughout the United States. And she was running this event where they invite all of the scholarship students at whatever year they are to come in and hear the speakers, but also to interview with organizations, kind of like a fair. And there were a lot of prominent organizations. It's an all-day event on a Saturday, and she wanted me to come in and be the keynote speaker. And she says, you got to do it. Because when they asked me if I knew anybody, I said, I have the perfect person and you can't make me look bad. That kind of stuff. So I said, all right, what would you like me to tell them? And she said, well, we have this topic that we agreed we like. It's called Leadership for Life, Setting and Accomplishing Your Goals. Can you come in and talk to them about goal setting? Now, I'm thinking, okay, so basically these are 17-year-old to 21-year-olds. There's about 300 or so of them that were going to be in attendance, and another 100 faculty and alumni and other professionals and a few parents and those kinds of things. And I thought, geez, what am I going to tell them? Because I don't really have a lot of goals that way. And they're college students, so I don't want to talk about educational goals because those are going to be relatively short-lived. So what kind of speech can I create for them that'll transcend time, it'll transcend gender, it'll transcend professional, it'll transcend whatever educational curriculum that they are taking. And so I put together a talk that was about getting everything you want out of life and how to have fun doing it. And I wrapped it in a goal-setting talk. And I gave this speech. It was 47 minutes. We had a lot of fun. They loved it. At least that's what they tell me. And off I went. And so that was that. I met a bunch of nice people. I got to touch some lives, and I got to talk about a subject that I like talking about, and it really challenged me to think through how I would approach it if I was that age, and if I could rewind the clock, back, and at that time I was much older than they were, twice their age, and what would I do? So about a month later, I was having lunch at Seasons 52 with my friend Jim Vasilopoulos. Some of you may have met him in November when he was here talking about his new book, Clarity, and his business and his leadership principles. And we met 3, 4, 5 times a year just to catch up for lunch or drinks or dinner or whatever it was. And we were in one of our sessions, lunch, and he said, what have you been up to? And I told him. And then he said to me, so you gave this, kind of like a commencement speech. I said, well, sort of. And he said, well, it reminds me of, have you ever heard of This Is Water? And I hadn't heard of This Is Water at the time. And he said, have you heard of David Foster Wallace? And I hadn't read any of his books. I've come to love his work. It's sad that he's passed. But in 2005, he did this commencement speech to the graduating class at Kenyon College. He said, in that speech, is all over the internet, and there's a book of the speech. He says, it sounds like what you did is very similar. He says, I'll send you a video clip or whatever, you should check this out. So I went home, he'd sent me the clip, I watched the clip, and it was a trimmed down version of the speech done to B-roll, but I was fascinated by it. So I ended up looking up the speech. I ended up ordering the ebook. I read the ebook and I looked at the ebook and I said, this is like, his speech was like 20 minutes. Mine was 47 minutes. It's twice as long. I got to get this book. I got to see what this is about. So I got this book called This Is Water. Now, I don't know if you can see this. Maybe the white is a little too bright, but I don't know if you certainly can see that, right? There's only one sentence on that page. I noticed this was a fairly light textbook, but it basically was his speech, which is fantastic. I would highly recommend this book. So I then thought, well, why not create in some way, package up my speech? So I didn't have a lot of time. I was very busy with recruitment, but my friend Laura said, well, we have the audio, right? We saw it. Why don't you give me the audio? I'll put the earbuds in. I'll type it out for you. And then you could take that and figure out how to get it get it published. So what I did was I used Amazon had a back in the day a self-publishing platform called Create Space. So I got engaged with them. It's since evolved into some kind of Kindle thing now, but I said to them, "Hey, look, I'd like to publish this book. I'll get you the cover. Let's work through this." And Out of Reach but in Sight: Using Goals to Achieve Your Impossible was born. Much like, I don't know that you can maybe make that out, but it's a fairly light text version. You could of the speech. You could read this book in 30 minutes. I talked it in 47 minutes, and I collect the royalties every month and have been since 2014 when this book came out. And then if you fast forward to 2019, I put an entire goal setting class together, an online training program with all the details behind these concepts. And then that became part of my leadership curriculum and so on and so forth. And 10 years ago, I would never have imagined that these things that I did would serve to be building blocks of a very long-term goal that has absolutely no deadline to it, which is my ability to coach and train. Even though at that time I could never have foreseen it, except that there were a few principles I used to know that spending those 47 minutes was going to be time well spent. And so I want you to think about that story as we go through this little talk today, because a lot of what I do in my life is done that way. And I feel like I've become very, very successful and have accomplished a lot, not because I look to accomplish a lot, but because I look to set up my entire life, and my hobbies, my relationships, my profession, my career, my vocation in that manner, where I put guardrails around the things that I do, because we only have so much time to allocate. We each all get the same amount of time. How we choose to use it is, I think, what sets us apart, or really makes us enjoy life more. So I don't know if you ever heard that story. This book is on sale. You can get it at Amazon. You can get the paperback. You can get the ebook. But that's how a lot of things in my life happen. And so I want to talk with you today about how I think about goals and some things I want you to think about before you set your goals. So I hope you enjoyed that story. If you enjoyed that story, click the thumbs up. Let me get into some of these principles here that kind of map the story back to the way I think. Now, when I think about goals in general, and so that I don't have to say this each time I make a point, what I'm about to share with you today is entirely my interpretation of goal setting. I know people who vehemently disagree with the way I look at goals. As always, take what you like, leave the rest. You don't need to agree. I'm opening up your mind to a new way of thinking about your goals. And the first thing that I want to talk about is how I think about goals and what a goal should do to you. Now, the top of this card says, what should goals do for you? And I think that when I look at goals, and in this book, and in the back cover, there's a quote about, a goal is nothing more than a vehicle to enhance your enjoyment of something you love. If it doesn't do that, don't set it. It's not worth setting. And I think that that's true, because goals are just facilitators. And what I find in most people that I meet is they're more worried about hitting the goal than they are truly about transforming themselves. The problem with a lot of people is they aim really low and hit, right? Instead of aiming really high and working towards to transform themselves to try to attain something that is so far beyond their current capability that the person that actually achieves that goal is a completely different person than the person who sets the goal. The problem for a lot of people is the person who achieves the goal is the same person who set the goal. They didn't really grow. And so I want you to think about goals more as a transformation, or a transformation list, as opposed to a checklist, because a lot of people have what are commonly known as SMART goals. And I don't use SMART goals. And I actually don't think anybody I've ever interviewed who's actually reached great heights has ever used SMART goals to get there. Because SMART, by their very definition of what they stand for, specific, measurable, achievable, right? Relatable, and time-based. Usually that means if I know it's achievable, I'm going to set it very low. And if it's very time-based, I'm going to put a date in that likely is not so far in the future. And not so far in the future also means not so much transformation for you. So I don't use SMART goals. And you might say, well, Andy, isn't it really a good idea for your psyche to achieve the goal and check it off? Well, if I gave you a choice and said, to use a running analogy, which is near and dear to my heart, right? A marathon's 26.2 miles. You can set a goal, and your SMART goal could be your 5K, which is 3.1 miles. And if that's your end goal, right, versus somebody else who sets the marathon, doesn't achieve the 26.2 miles, but somehow goes from a couch potato and a non-runner to being able to run, say, 20 miles. Now, if I put the two of you in a race, not that life is one, would you rather be the person that achieved the goal, or would you rather be the person that was able to run 20 miles, right? Even though you didn't get to check it off or collect the finisher's medal or ribbon or whatever it was. And so that's the way I look at life. So the goals I set are very big. They are usually they take multiple years to actually achieve. And I'm looking at the day in and day out enjoyment that I get as I work toward these goals. So point number one is think about a goal and align it to something you love that supports who you are, that helps you transform, not just check things off. I would rather you have 1 or 2 or 3 goals tops in a year and really work toward them, because you're only going to be able to have a couple. I only have a couple a year, none of which have to do with my corporate revenue, and everything that have to do with something that I create of value, like a book or something like that. So that's point number one. Achievement is less important than what that goal does to you from a transformation perspective. The second thing is, I genuinely believe this, what I'm about to tell you. Any of you, whoever you are, and whatever your goals are, you can achieve them. You can accomplish whatever you set your mind to do. I have faith you will be able to figure it out. I have faith that if you give yourself enough time, you'll achieve it. Yeah, you might have some bumps and bruises along the way. That's the whole point. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you can achieve your goals. But a lot of people don't achieve their goals. A lot of people don't even try to achieve their goals. And there are many reasons people fail. There's bad planning. There's bad goals, right? They set them around something somebody else wanted them to achieve, or how it was going to look, or they thought they had to get that promotion or whatever. But the number one reason why people don't achieve their goals is because they're unwilling to create the space in their life in order to do the work to actually achieve it. So when I put a goal plan together and all the components that go into it, and there's 10 or so different components that go into every goal plan that I do, the first thing I do in the wake of, is this who I want to be and all this other stuff that needs to support my life, is I figure out what I have to give up. And the reason most people don't achieve the goals they want to, or achieve them as fast as they want to, is because they're unwilling to subtract things from their life to create the space. So some of you know that I love to do long-form triathlons, and I've been doing them now for just a handful of years, not quite a handful of years. And in 2019, throughout my life, I have been a runner. I was biking before to cross train more than anything. I liked strength training and that kind of stuff. I didn't know how to swim, not really, and I couldn't make it across a 25-meter pool without getting huffing and puffing, not because I wasn't in shape, but just because I didn't really know how to swim and didn't know how to breathe properly. So I decided that I wanted to not just do a triathlon, I wanted to do the longest triathlons. Well, the longest that most people could do, but they're long. And in order to do that, if I couldn't get across a 25-meter pool without huffing and puffing, how was I going to swim a couple of miles in a lake or an ocean, right? Without the nice rails there to keep me in line with the clear blue water with the stripe below it, on the bottom of the pool. So the first thing that I did was I said, well, okay, I got to learn how to swim. I know I need to do that, but I also need to. I'm going to need to work out harder. I'm going to need to work out more often. I'm going to need to work out more hours. And so I wonder what that's really going to take. So I started just looking online. I started to look at some plans, and I started to see the number of hours that you would need to dedicate. This didn't even include the fact that I needed to learn how to swim, which meant lessons and more time and all that other good stuff. And then I jotted all this down, and I looked at these, 20 hours of training or whatever it was. And then I took it, had a night's sleep, looked at it again. And then I realized, well, hang on. I mean, I got to bike for 4 hours and run an hour and a half. That's 5 or 6 hours. But wait, I got to drive there. And the body is taxing itself, which means it's going to need more treatments. See the physical therapist and the chiropractor and the whatever, right, kind of thing, and the massages and so on and so forth. And I got to add that time in. And then what else am I not going to get? I'm not going to be able to go grocery shopping with my wife on a Saturday, and so on and so forth. And looking at everything that actually has to come out of my life. You can't play golf with your buddies when you're training for 8 hours on a Saturday and a Sunday kind of thing, right? So I'm looking at what this is going to take. This is no different than any of your professional accomplishments where, you're here and you want to be here. Well, you're going to have to add time in your calendar to grow skills, work out, so to speak, on things that you're going to need to improve, because it's rarely going to happen when you're doing, your tasks between 9 and 5. And so I just want you to really think about what is it going to take if you want to grow. So I wrote a book this year in 2020, at the end of 2022 to the first 5 months of 2023. And I had to create an additional 14 hours of writing time into my schedule, which meant I had to find 14 hours to give up something else. And I'm not talking about giving up sleep. There's other things that you can give up. But the point is, this is the number one reason you're not going to achieve your goals. It isn't going to be because you don't have the capacity. It isn't going to be because you can't swim that far, run that fast, climb that mountain, or whatever your Mount Everest is. This is the reason you're going to fail. If you can create the space in your life, and it means enough to you, because it has to mean enough. If it doesn't mean enough, if you don't love it, you're going to throw in the towel. And you're never more at risk of throwing in the towel than at the first stumble. So if you love it and you stumble, you'll get back up, and you'll stumble again and you'll get back up. So think about this. Give me a hay for sacrifice. That is a big honking deal. The next thing is, this is the ultimate safety net when you're setting a goal. I literally never set a goal for anything that isn't completely congruent with who I am and who I want to be. Many people set them for what they want to accomplish. So I want you to set the goal for the who, not the what. So what do I mean? Well, let me give you a couple of examples. Maybe the personal one will continue with the triathlon, and a professional one, and I can give you with me as a trainer. I like being healthy. I like being fit. That's who I am. And if I was going to rearrange things in my life, I wanted them to be congruent with that. So the fact that I was going to be training harder and training more and training constantly all year round, I wanted it to be for something that meant something to me. Who I am is a healthy person, generally. Nay, my martinis, and I do like cigars, but the man's got to live, right? Can't be totally obsessed. So, but the point is, that's congruent with who I am. If you want to follow that line and you want to lose weight, that's great. You want to starve yourself? That's one way to do it, not a healthy way to do it. But it isn't just about dropping weight. That's a what. You need to become the who is somebody who mechanically operates a healthy life. You're going to need to go to the grocery store for an hour on a Saturday, maybe at Wednesday too, or Instacart it or whatever. That means you need to avoid having the chips, in the pantry. Sometimes they're like my kryptonite, but right. Are you going to cook dinner? Are you going to wash the dishes? Are you going to go through the process of, you're going to plan your meals? Are you going to, whatever it is, you have to build a lifestyle around the who in order to ensure you're going to do it. And there's even sub-who's. I don't know that I really intended to say it that way, but I think of myself as a trainer. So when I was a recruiter and I wanted to make this transition into the third act of my life, I thought about, I'm a helper. I am a facilitator of great careers. That's what I want to do. And I want to help the people do it. And I don't want to just help people in the US. I want to help them around the world. So how can I not only become what it is that I want to do to facilitate what I want to happen, but do it in a manner that is completely in alignment with truly who I am here? Meaning you probably have some trainers that create some audios and some videos and they pop them up on a system or maybe their YouTube channel and that's it. And that's all you see of them. You might have some trainers that are not really trainers. Maybe they're authors. Maybe they're bloggers. That's okay too. That's who they are. I am somebody who needs to be present with you, which means I needed to figure out a format that let me be me. And I had a goal in January of 2018 when I decided, doing live shows is kind of nice, and I was doing them infrequently in, say, 2016 and 17. But I made a commitment in January 2018 to show up every week, at a minimum, every week. And so I needed to know what that was going to take because I was going to have to sacrifice another hour, but it was more than an hour because I had to prepare the stuff and whatever. But it was who I am. I want to be a coach that's present for them. I want to hear them as we are working. I want to speak with them frequently. I want to be available when they need help, not somebody that just creates some videos and kind of goes off about my business. That's just not who I am. So think in terms of all directions around who you are. Is this who I'm going to be? And what you invite into your life needs to coexist with the who. Now, I'm not going to go into detail here, but I've talked to you before, and I alluded to it early in the talk about there's 4 questions I ask myself before I decide whether I'm going to do something. And it has to do with what it does for me, what it does for someone else, right? Things of that nature. Am I learning a skill and things like that? The point being, I have filters for what I let into my life to ensure that they align to who I am. And that there's real congruence because I genuinely mean this. You will become more stressed out in your life by the things you say yes to than the things you say no to. And the other thing is you're really going to be stressed out when you say yes to things you don't want to do, especially if there's something you're going to have to do for a sustained period of time. So I want you to think about that. And then going back to my story initially, I want to give you kind of these 5, I don't even want to call them steps as much as I want to call them evolutions because they're not do this, do this, do this, do this. It's start here, then continue, then continue. There's no finite amount of time. There's no deadlines. There's just an evolutionary process by anything that you want to enter into your life. I thought to myself, that story about the goals, the story about me becoming a trainer, this is what I went through. So you have an aspiration, right? What is it? Right? If you want to run a marathon, that's great. You can have an aspiration, but don't be setting goals to run a marathon unless you understand what it's going to take and are comfortable with it. Get into it. So you'll never get it until you get into it. And it's going to look a little different than you anticipated. Nothing ever goes according to plan and nothing ever looks like what we think it will, and nothing ever feels exactly like we think it will. So you got to get in there, and what does that look like? What does that feel like? Is this something I like? Is it congruent with who I am? And then you got to learn. Learn enough to know what you know and what you don't and whether you like it. Okay? Because if you can see how much more opportunity there is to learn and grow, I think you're going to be happier, and it's going to make the 4th stage a lot easier, which is patience. And patience absolutely does not mean waiting. Okay? Patience is the opposite of waiting. Patience is working your tail off over and over and having faith the results will be there. And if you stick with it, you'll be around to see it when they decide to show up, kind of thing. And so you need to make sure that you know whatever you're doing is an iteration. That's it. There's no finality to any step you take. None, unless you quit. That's the only one that's final. Okay? So, and then decide, is it worth setting goals around this? So that to me is the biggest deal, because people set the goal too early. When I set the Ironman goal on the same day I signed up for swimming lessons, I already was fairly familiar with what that could entail. I just knew that if given enough time, I would be able to learn how to swim fine, not be tired, be in shape, learn the other stuff, learn all these other things to take my exercising and my training up a level. But for you, this is really important. I did not just become an online career coach and trainer overnight. There were evolutionary processes to this. There was an incubation period. There was learning and understanding, and then figuring out what were the mediums by which I could deliver it. How could I make sure that I could still be me and do this? And then did I love this enough that no matter what happened and whatever changes were going to come, that it meant so much to me that I would learn whatever I needed to learn, part 3, in order to deliver them whatever they needed, because I cared about their careers more so than I cared about the mediums that I used, that I didn't know how to use a camera. I didn't know how to shoot videos. I didn't know how to create a podcast. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. If it was up to me, I'd sit around all day in my pajamas and write. Okay, kind of thing. But people like this format. And I like this format. And I fell in love with this format because I kept doing it. I kept getting better at it, right? And I kept getting the reaction from you. And I kept getting data from you, right? And it was fun. It is fun, kind of thing. So think about this evolutionary process, and don't have finality anywhere along the way, right? The longer you give yourself, the longer you give yourself, right? The less risk involved in the process, the greater the likelihood you're going to achieve it. If you give yourself less time, the greater the likelihood you won't achieve it, the greater the likelihood you're going to get more frustrated. So think about this as an evolutionary process, kind of a winning mindset here. And then the last thing I want to tell you is go big. They should be BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. And a goal is not to sit there to be a judge, like, oh, I need to work out today. I need to eat right today. I need to whatever, right? So they should be a pulling force to help you transform in a facilitator to help you achieve something you love. But I don't even want to say achieve it as much as I want to say to make sure that you're doing it day in and day out. And the longer term you set the goal, the more important it's going to be to make sure you have a good map. You fall in love with the goal. You do not fall in love with the map, with the plan. It's never a straight line. But if your strategy is intact and the goal is a good one, and it's set in alignment with who you are and what you're about, and it's for something that you truly enjoy, you'll be able to adjust the plan in order to attain it if given yourself enough time. So I genuinely like to create big goals because, number one, they keep my attention. They make me work harder. They keep me disciplined because I know if I don't put the work in today, I'm not going to be able to hit the step next week, what somebody else might call a SMART goal. I just call it's a step. I'm way past that. That is not my end game kind of thing. It's just a stepping stone. It's something I check off along the way to say I hit the milestone, but it isn't the actual goal. So that's my interpretation. Now, if you like what you heard today related to these things, right? Think about what a goal should do. It's about transformation. Step 1 is really about sacrifice. Yes, get your plans in order and so on. Set them around who you are, not what you want to attain. Use this 5-stage process and go big, go big. You will be so much happier, even if you don't actually attain it for a long time. But I know you will. But it's about the journey. It's about the journey. So if you like this, click the like button. If you're here with me live, we're going to the chat. If you're watching this on a recording, I'll see you next week.